We space the songs out here. Yeah. Thank you very much. That sunny side of life is that light within from spirit. And as long as we walk that side in that consciousness, life works well. So good morning again.
Good morning.
We're going to talk today about the topic of evolutionary awakening. And it's part of the vision of the Global Heart Vision from all of our centers for spiritual living. It says we strive to assist individuals in their own evolutionary awakening process. We strive to assist individuals in their own evolutionary awakening process. That's what we're here for. We're here to wake up, right? We're here to evolve and to become more than we already have been. Right? That's why I'm here. Yeah. The original talk title was going to be Don't Do Anything Till I Come Back. That was the official talk title from Home Office. I didn't care for that title, but I found out where it came from, and I love the quote that it comes from. It came from Swami Bhyanananda, who was here last year, as many of you may remember. And he says, I believe we were created to evolve. Otherwise, Jesus would have said, now don't do a thing until I get back. Which he didn't say. I love it because we're hearing a teaching where Ernest Holmes says, be open at the top. This is what I know. This is what I've found out. Go further. Go further. You know, I like to say we're part of the Buzz Lightyear teaching, to infinity and beyond. Okay? That's what we're doing. That's what we're playing with here today. So evolution is the continual unfolding of spirit, of the life energy itself. That's what evolution is. It's always spirit expressing more and more of what it is. That's the evolution. That's the process of it. And it begins with that life energy, and it begins by the one mind contemplating its own nature. And its own nature is life, its own nature is love, its own nature is intelligence, its own nature is beauty and power. Okay? It's all that, and it contemplates that, and it shows up as that in form. And it brings its own nature into being. Life wants form to play with, right? We want form to play with. If I gave you the opportunity to have the idea of a beautiful piece of chocolate or the piece of chocolate, which would you prefer? The piece of chocolate, right? Like if you had the opportunity to have a loving relationship or just the idea of love, which would you take? The loving relationship, right? Some of you say, no, never mind. We won't go there. So spirit brings life into being for its own enjoyment. For its own enjoyment. We're here to have a good time. A friend of mine has written a book that says, show God a good time. We're here as God. Show ourselves, show God itself a good time. It's the divine artist creating its expression. Spirit is a divine artist creating its expression. And guess what? We are that expression of art. You want to see a piece of art? Look in the mirror. Look at the person next to you. You're a work of art. Amen. A beautiful work of art. And unlike the human artist who creates a work of art and then it's finished and it's done, gets sold, hung on a wall, stuck in a museum or whatever like that, the creation of the divine continues on and on and on. It's constantly in motion. It's constantly unfolding. You and I are the continual expression of the divine. There is, of course, the story of the artist who his work was hung in a museum and he came back later on with his paints and his palette and modified his painting as it was hanging in the museum because he had a new idea about it. So that's actually, we kind of laugh about it, but it's the idea of spirit continuously creating. We are that. Okay? And since we're consciousness made manifest, that's who we are. We are, as far as we know, we are the highest form of consciousness in form on this planet at this time. Unless, of course, you're Douglas Adams, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and then the mice are the highest form of consciousness on the planet. The dolphins are next, and we're third. Okay? For those of you who know Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. For those of you who don't, just don't worry about it. We have the ability to choose and to be aware of the consequences of our choice. We are consciousness made manifest here, okay? And so we create using the one mind. We are the artist's not only are we artistic creations, we are the individualization of the artistic creative process, and we are constantly creating works of art called our lives. Our lives are works of art. And if you take one look at that and say, I'm not so sure I like the painting I just created or the sculpture I just created, guess what? You can change it. I was an art major in college for 1 year. I changed major every year. And I did this painting that when I got through with it, I hated it. Just hated it. And so I remember one time I was standing in the art class, and I'd had a friend who was in the class who was trying to encourage me to loosen up in my painting style. It was a little restricted. And I was frustrated with this painting, and so after a while I was just sitting there kind of squeezing paint out of the tube on it and smearing it around. And at one point I squeezed some on my palette knife and just like stepped back and threw it at the painting, you know. And she walked over with this big smile on her face. She goes, "Did I just see you throwing paint at your canvas? Like, this is a breakthrough, okay?" And eventually I did a whole other thing with it and actually sold the painting for a decent amount of money. Okay? We can create something new. We can take whatever we have and create something new. We can create whatever our life looks like now and create something new. And we create like Spirit does through contemplation. We contemplate the nature of what it is that we want to express. We do it through contemplation. So the question then becomes, what am I contemplating? Not just what's the passing wish through my mind, but what am I contemplating? What is it that I spend most of my mental time and energy on? What am I actually contemplating? Am I contemplating the circumstances as they exist now? Or am I contemplating the divine vision and the highest and greatest good that I would love to experience in a particular area of my life? What am I contemplating now? And being aware of that. And sometimes when I ask myself that question, I sit there and go, oops, got to change the contemplation. That should be a song. I got to change my contemplation. Sounds like an Eddie Watkins sort of thing, you know? Change my stinking thinking. The one mind is always creating ever more complex forms of itself. It doesn't stay in one place. I love the Khalil Gibran reading that life does not go backward, nor tarries with yesterday. See, the arrows that are shot forth from the bow, the children that it talks about, are our thoughts. Yes, it's our physical children, but even more deeply than that, it's our thoughts. It's our vision for the future that we shoot forward. And we are both the bow and the arrow. And we are constantly shooting arrows out into our future. What's the target we're aiming at? What's the target we're hitting? We can't go with our children. They will go places that we have never been before. And I was talking with some young friends of mine who are in their kind of late 20s, early 30s, and they say, you know, what we've noticed is that it's not even a generation anymore. It's not even taking a generation to show up. It's happening in half generations now. Half generations. Kids are being born 15 years into the process who know more than they do already. We're speeding up. And that's good news. It's uncomfortable, but it's good news. So Spirit creates more and more for a wider scope of enjoyment. That's why we do the complexity. That's why it does more complex forms of itself. It has a wider scope of enjoyment and freedom. We get to enjoy Spirit today more vastly and more widely than it has ever been known before. 150 years ago, there wasn't a church like this around. Today, they're all over the world. Whether we have religious science or unity or divine science, even some of the Christian churches starting to adopt the same idea and the same thought process. This teaching is moving out this idea, and it's not, we don't own this. The religious science doesn't own this teaching. We just disseminate it. We're a place that tries to disseminate it with as much clarity as we can. Okay? But we don't own it. But this teaching is becoming more known everywhere. There are sports figures, there are celebrities who are meditating these days, right? And have been for like the last 25, 50 years. 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago, meditation, who was doing that? Gandhi. And a few people. Today, lots of people meditate. It's going up. It's a wider opportunity. It's a greater opportunity. That's why so much more is showing up. Our horizon lines, the view that we have of what the world looks like, are expanding. They're expanding. How much good can we see? More than we used to be able to. We can conceive of the idea of a world that works for everyone. In other words, we are co-creating evolution. Okay? Troward tells us that eventually, Thomas Troward was a British judge who spent most of his career in India, studied Hinduism, studied all sorts of different things. And when he retired, he moved back to England. He encountered some New Thought speakers in the early 1900s who triggered off both what he already knew and more in him. And so he himself started to give lectures and do writings based on this. And so he says that eventually we reach the point where evolution proceeds through the exercise of conscious selection and initiative on the part of the individual. We get to both select what it looks like and have the initiative to make it happen, to move it forward. We are now creating evolution. It's no longer being done to us. It's no longer just happening. We get to consciously play in evolution. At the first service, I remember I was transmitting or whatever some old 60s and 70s songs. And one of them was from the very first Jefferson Starship album that says, "Where do we go from here? Chaos or community?" There's a line in that song. Where do we go from here? We get to choose. We're not just passengers on the plane anymore. We get to choose. Where are we going from here? We get to be conscious creators, conscious evolutionaries. Okay? So what that means, guess what? We are the second coming. We are the Buddha being incarnated again. We are the Savior we've been waiting for. That's us. That's us. And you and I, we're on the cutting edge of this process because we're sitting in a center like this. We're playing and exploring consciousness. We're the part of the sharp edge of the stick. I think Mary Morrissey calls it the green growing edge, where we're starting to make this happen and we're starting to get conscious about it and we're starting to choose, how do I want this to show up? What is it that I want to show up? What is the energy that I want to bring to this world? So how does this work? When you and I went to school, biology in Biology 101, when we got evolution taught to us, right? For those who did, I was sharing this with Cynthia, and she goes, well, I went to a Christian high school. They didn't talk about evolution at all. But for those of us who got evolution taught, we were mostly taught that evolution was this kind of long, steady, growing period over a period of time, right? Anybody else besides me? Okay. In about the mid-70s, a couple of scientists named Niles Eldridge and Stephen Jay Gould said, no, that's not how it works at all. We've been studying the fossil records. What we found is there's a long period of stasis. Everything stays the same. And all of a sudden, pow, something jumps. They called it punctuated equilibrium. I love that phrase. I learned it in ministerial school. And I've been using it ever since. Punctuated equilibrium. It means you can go along, and all of a sudden something pops. Something completely new shows up. And what they said was, it doesn't show up across the board in all aspects of the species. Only part of the species will do the jump and evolve, and the rest of it stays the same. We go along, and no matter what it's looked like for so many years or eons, it jumps. Think of the last 150 years in our culture. And remember, when you do those comparisons where, if the history on the earth was the length of a football field, the history of mankind would be the last blade of grass right before the end zone. Okay, that sort of thing. Okay, even within that blade of grass, we are going through a punctuated equilibrium right now. 200 years ago, if you and I wanted to get to San Francisco, we would use the same methods that have been used for hundreds of years. We would either walk, get on the back of an animal, or have an animal tow a cart that we were in, or we would canoe. That was it, right? Today, we can drive. If the traffic is decent, we'll drive faster than the walking was. We can fly. We cannot even have to go to San Francisco because if we're going there to meet with somebody, we can Skype in. If we're going there to shop, we can shop the shops online. We don't even have to put our physical body there anymore to be there and do what we want, right? We have evolved so quickly. That's just in the last, most of that's actually just in the last 50 years. 50. Many of us are old enough in this building to have watched that timeline grow. could watch that happen. And so if it feels like the world is moving faster than ever, it is. It is. Because that's the nature of evolution, and that's what Spirit is creating and showing up as. We are in the point of punctuated equilibrium. Now, the challenge with that is, as Troward says, race thought, the common thought, the normal thought of humanity, is opposed to evolution. Why is that? Because it's comfortable to stay the same. It's comfortable to stay where I am. And we spend a lot of our time going, remember those good old days? Okay? And the thing is that those good old days weren't really all that good if you think about them. Or they were good for only a limited number of people. So whenever we become an evolutionary, we become automatically a revolutionary. We are creating a revolution in consciousness. What that means is, you'll love this, evolutionaries, like you and I, are misfits. Yay! And that's what we would get in this group, right? People who say, yay, I am a misfit. Okay? The fact that we're in this kind of a center in Reading, right, is a misfit with the general, what's going on around. Okay? We are misfits, and we celebrate that. And most of us have probably been, to some degree, felt like misfits in our whole life. I remember when I grew up in the teaching that I belonged in, I felt like a misfit. I don't quite agree with that. I like some aspects of it, and I didn't agree with other aspects of it. And we're misfits. Evolutionaries are misfits because they don't fit in the current system. They don't fit in the current system. By definition, evolution means that we don't fit in what's already existing because we're moving into something else. We're that part of the species. And what we teach in this teaching, by the way, is that eventually the whole species moves into this. This is not a separation sort of thing. This is not a we're better than other people sort of thing. But we're riding a wave that everybody else is going to be on sooner or later. We're just the cutting edge of it. We're just the cutting edge of it. We're the people who are willing to say, yeah, I'm willing to go there sooner. That's why you and I showed up on this planet at this time. Okay? Troward tells us that race thought is opposed to the attempt of the individual to pass into a higher order of life. If I want to expand and become more, there is a resistance in life. Okay? Michael Beckwith puts it this way: the mind of mediocrity always opposes the mind of excellence. The mind of mediocrity always opposes the mind of excellence. Why is that? Because mediocrity is more comfortable. It's easier to be mediocre, right? Excellence takes work. Evolution takes, I'm willing to look at where I am and do something different. Be someone different. I'm willing to go where I haven't gone before. And what I want to say about this is this mind of mediocrity that opposes us, it happens both outside of us, but it also happens within us. We are our own mind of mediocrity. We are our own race thought resistance to evolution. I joked with the first service, it's why I don't go to the gym. It's a whole lot easier and more comfortable, and I've got this nice pattern running where I come home, I sit down with half a pint of ice cream, or sometimes the whole pint of ice cream. I just discovered a wonderful new flavor, and I won't go back to that store that has it again for a while. Because it's comfortable, it's my pattern. We watch people stay in dysfunctional relationships because why? They're comfortable there. They know how it works. Well, it's better than whatever this might be over here. Even though over here might be the opportunity for something bigger, better, greater than has ever been experienced before. It's comfortable for us. And so as we work to create a world that works for all, the vision that we're working on this year, we meet resistance. Have you noticed? We meet resistance. We get comments like, who are you to make that happen? This is sort of the variation. Remember when you were a kid, don't get too big for your britches? Who do you think you are? Okay? It's the variation of that. And an evolutionary always is experiencing that because an evolutionary is always outgrowing their britches. Your britches are too small for you, right? That's why you don't fit in your britches anymore. And we want to evolve. Crawling is not the best way to get around the world. We evolved out of crawling, right? We learned how to walk. and ride bicycles and drive and fly planes and whatever else we do. Okay? We get that resistance. We get told it's unrealistic. One of my favorites is when we talk about this idea of creating a world that works for all. Oh, you're just an old hippie. Okay? We've been talking about peace and love since Jesus and Buddha and Lao Tzu and the Bhagavad Gita and every other spiritual teaching for thousands of years. But if that's somebody's idea of an old hippie, that's called derision. That's called putting you down for daring to be something more. Okay? Or we get, that's nice. Now let's get real. Have you seen the world today? Do you know, have you got your head in the sand? Look at it. It's getting worse. It's getting worse. It's getting worse. Okay? No. The worst is getting louder, but the world is getting better.
Amen. Amen.
When we put the emphasis on that, the emphasis is always on what's real, which is the circumstances, that which stands around us, circumstance. Who created the circumstances? We did. Individually in our lives and collectively on the planet. We create the circumstances. And guess what the good news is? We can change our thinking, which is what created the circumstances in the first place. We can change our consciousness. That's what this is about, is we are evolving our consciousness. We are evolving how good and how much God we can transmit. How much of an art project can we create as this planet? How beautiful can we make it? Okay? So we have to move from the current circumstances. We have to move from the hypnosis of thinking that just because it is this way, it must stay this way. It doesn't have to. Nothing has to. Emerson tells us that we look at fixed items in the universe's liquid law. The process is constantly changing. That's why quantum physicists tell us that what we think is so solid, what we think is matter, is such a small part of what's really going on. We're still a percentage, tiny percentage of matter. Fraction of a percentage. That's why one of the teachers, Emma Curtis Hopkins, says there is no matter. What she saw was it's the constant process of conscious creation. Yes, it shows up in form and then it's done. Yes, it shows up in form and then it's done. It shows up and it's gone. That's what we're doing, is we're constantly evolving our consciousness and our creation. Okay? So how does that work? We get to play with it. So this week I invite us to do 3 things. Number 1, using that process of contemplation that Spirit does, contemplate the fullness of the divine this week. See, however big a picture you and I have of God, it's not big enough. And because we're finite beings contemplating an infinite presence, it'll never be big enough, but that doesn't mean we can't stretch and see more than where we already are. We rise higher in consciousness, we see more. Okay? And so this week, spend some time contemplating that divine. Stretch your view, stretch your consciousness. How much more can I contemplate and experience? And we begin to create that self-contemplation. And then the second thing I invite us to do is to be willing to let the evolutionary impulse of Spirit express through you. Be willing. I'm just willing to let this evolutionary process express through me. Now, what I'm going to tell you is it's uncomfortable. I mean, that's just, I don't know if it's good news or bad news, but it's uncomfortable. You know, you were talking about a divorce and going through the divorce. Many of us have done that. It's uncomfortable. Sometimes that's a really low-key word for how uncomfortable it is, right? But we get on the other side of it and we have evolved and become more. And that's what we're doing. So are we willing to let ourselves become uncomfortable? Are we willing to let ourselves, I love the title of the book by Joe Dispenza, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. Are we willing to break the habit of being the self that we have been and start becoming the self that might be more and that might be who we want to be? Because we're always in that process of growing. We're always in that process of growing. We find that we have a desire to return to a simpler time, but we can't go backwards. We can't go backwards. And the reason, by the way, we outgrew that time is because it no longer worked. It didn't work. That's why we're not there anymore. I mean, it worked for when it was, but we can now see more. And so we've evolved into past that time. And then the third practice is to catch a greater vision of the world working by asking the question, what wants to express through or as me? So this is getting specific, from the contemplation of the divine to what wants to express through me and as me in this world. And then contemplate that. Contemplate that answer. We don't have to know the how. Oftentimes we don't want to contemplate that because we don't know how to make it happen. I have a closing quote that we'll talk about that in a moment. But we don't have to know the how. We have to be willing to allow the what to come through us. So would you join me in that spiritual practice this week? We're contemplating the divine more fully than ever before. We're being willing to let the evolutionary process flow through us. And then we're asking the question, and how can that show up in my life as me now? Would you be willing to play with me with this? Great. It'll rock your world, and it will rock the world as we play in this. I'm going to close with this quote from Ernest Holmes. Within the idea which spirit drops into the creative medium. And when I say spirit, it's not something out there. We're spirit. We're spirit in form. So as we drop ideas into the creative medium, into the process that just creates, okay? Within the idea which spirit drops into the creative medium is everything necessary to bring this idea into form. Within the idea, see, the seed when we plant it in the ground has everything necessary to show up as the oak tree or as the tulip bulb, or tulip plant, tulip flower. It has everything necessary. We don't have to figure it out. Spirit never thinks of methods or processes. For that which the Spirit involves, with which the Spirit involves itself, must evolve. As we open up and let Spirit involve itself with us, we will evolve. We don't have to figure out the how. We have to be willing and we have to be engaged with Spirit. He goes on to say, the contemplation of Spirit, the self-knowingness of God produces involution, and the evolution is the passing of thought into manifestation. So as we contemplate this, as we create an opening for it to be, we allow that thought, that idea, to then proceed into form, into manifestation. So I invite you to join me with that this week. And beyond this week, way beyond this week. Let's move into prayer. And knowing that there is only this life energy, only this one mind, only this one heart, this love, this power, this intelligence, this beauty, this artist, both creating and expressing through us as artists ourselves. There's only that one infinite presence. And because it is one, we are one of it. We are indeed individualized artistic expressions and artistic creators. We move that energy forward through our contemplation. We are one of that infinite presence, here and now. So we are one of the love, one of the life energy, one of the beauty, one with the intelligence, one with the power. We are that. We are that, here and now. And so I speak my word that we are letting that flow out from us more beautifully, more wonderfully than we have ever created before. We are creating on the palette of life. And we don't even have to know how. We're willing to show up for the painting class and learn the how from Spirit, from the teacher of the universe. We simply say yes. We simply allow this evolution that is already happening, this flow of life that is already happening, to happen through us. And I know that as more and more and more of us around the world say yes to this light, to this love, that it shows up in ways that we've never seen before, more beautifully, more powerfully, more lovingly, more alive. And so what we see is what's already here, which is heaven as earth. So for this, I'm grateful. For each of us who's saying yes to this, for each of us around the world who's participating in this process of evolving, of opening up, of being conscious, and of expanding how conscious we are, I'm ever so grateful. For the Spirit that moves through us in this process and creates more and more and more beauty to enjoy, more and more love to experience, more and more life to be lived. I'm ever so grateful. And so I release this word into that creative medium that we call the law, and allow it to show up, allow it to manifest into form in our lives in the most beautiful, perfect, and powerful ways here and now. We simply say yes and affirm that together by saying, and so it is. Bless you. Thank you.